For this session, we are looking at the three jewels of the Buddhist tradition, or also called the three treasures. And these three treasures are the gems that our hearts truly take as our refuge. We say in the morning, Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami, which is a Pali language chant that says, to the Buddha, I go for refuge. To the Dharma, I go for refuge. To the Sangha, I go for refuge. What does it mean, first of all, to go for refuge? Our hearts are in a place where we realize a dissatisfaction in our day-to-day lives, that our hearts are made for something much more than what our physical or other material desires can offer us. Our hearts are made for something beyond pleasure, power, and possessions. And as long as it does not realize that, as long as our hearts keep on trying to grab power, possessions, pleasure, thinking that it will satisfy us, there is something not quite right in us. And that is the dis-ease, the unease that we find because our hearts are made for something much bigger than what these human endeavors can really give to us to satisfy inner heart's longing. And so we look for something that is beyond these, and so that is why we seek refuge. This unease or this dis-ease that we realize is happening in us once we realize that we cannot be satisfied with these worldly pursuits, makes us want to go to something that can give us that ease and satisfaction and that sense of security that we're in a good place. And so that's what we take in this tradition as our sense of direction. This is where to go. The Buddha, the Dharma, Sangha. We go for refuge, meaning we place our trust in these three jewels with the understanding and with the realization and with that conviction that they will lead us to where our heart is longing. So we take those three refuges. And now we're trying to understand what each one of them is all about. Yesterday we addressed the Buddha. I have not said everything that needs to be said about that, but for today, I will look at the second refuge, the Dharma, and then in the next few days or so, just tie things up together so that we see these three jewels as a singular direction for us to open our hearts and realize that inner peace, to realize that inner joy, to realize that which our hearts are longing for. So what is the Dharma? The word Dharma comes from the Sanskrit word which means to hold or to maintain. So it's written as D-H-R. In romanization, it's dr, pronounced as dr. It's a verb which means precisely to hold, to maintain, to sustain. So in noun form, Dharma, it means etymologically that which sustains, that which holds, that which supports, that which pervades throughout. And so another way of translating Dharma, based on the usage in the Hindu and then the Buddhist traditions, which of course have different nuances in taking this term, is the liberating truth that our hearts are seeking, to find that freedom, to realize that freedom to be as we are. Dharma, the liberating truth that our hearts are longing for, to really find our home, to find our place in the universe, to really be truly as we are. So, what is the Dharma? When Siddhartha Gautama came to that moment of realizing that place of peace through his practice of silent meditation, after 6 years of intense search, he was filled with that inner peace and joy and gratitude. And he could have stayed there, just sitting there for the rest of his life, he thought. But then as he looked around and saw the world for what it is from his mind's eye, he saw that there were so many people who were still precisely in that place where he was 6 years before, when he started his search, namely looking for something to anchor themselves, looking for something to place their lives upon so that they could live in peace and security and a sense of belonging. So he felt that nudge of compassion in him. I cannot let this go by, and I must share this discovery with everyone. So that's what moved him to move from his cushion to the village where he could mingle with people and where he could have the opportunity to share with them what he had realized. So in doing so, he realized that he could not put into words the content of that realization that gave him that freedom, that gave him that peace and the sense of connection with an infinite horizon. So what can I do? When he was asked, "Sir, you look so peaceful and calm, and we would like to live like you in that way of truly being at peace with yourself and being so considerate and so heartwarming and so wide-hearted. Please let us know. How can we be like you? What shall we do? Please teach us." So he realized that words could never exhaust what he realized, and so he could never effectively use words in a way that would summarize or in a way that would truly depict what he realized. It was beyond words. But so what he said then was, "Come and see for yourselves." He did not give them a doctrine. This is what I saw, this is what I realized. So if you believe this, then you will be able to get awakened yourself. No, he said instead, "Come and see for yourself." Ehipassiko, that is a constant phrase in early scriptures that the Buddha is said to have responded to questioners about how they too may live an awakened life. So that's the first indication of his Dharma, which can be understood in its two levels. Dharma is that which the Buddha realized, that the liberating truth that the Buddha realized, which cannot be put adequately into words. But then somehow humans are beings consigned to language, and so he felt that he needed to put them into words, even though he knew the futility of it. So the best thing he could do was using words to invite them to taste it for themselves. Come and see, ehipassiko. And so what do? Then the basic guidelines for arriving at the place where he himself arrived at, the place of peace, by a twofold approach. First, stop your mind from its searching and from its grasping and from its analyzing. Stop your discursive mind from thinking that you can get what you want by your thinking and by your speculation. In short, just be still. Let your mind be still. Be calm. Just allow it to stop from its activity and allow it to just be still right here, right now. And the word in Sanskrit for that is shamatha, which in Pali is given in very almost the same way, samatha. Stop your mind from its meanderings and allow it to just be still. If you're you must be recognizing that as precisely what Zen is about. We have inherited that tradition that tells us, that conveys to us that message of the Buddha. How do we arrive at that place of freedom and that way of awakening to that which our hearts are longing for? First and foremost, let your mind and heart be still. Just be there. You don't have to do anything. Just be still. Shamatha. And in that stillness, as you continue to place yourself in that place of stillness, your hearts will open and you will see things as they are. To see things as they are without obstruction. In Sanskrit, it's Vipassana, or in Pali, Vipassana. In short, you will be able to see with the eyes of the heart. Vipassana. What does that kind of seeing entail? Well, normally we look around us, and if we have healthy eyes, or even with glasses, we can see. Looking around, there are trees, there are buildings, there are dogs walking around with people behind them, or the other way around, people walking their dogs with their leashes and so on, just maybe like what Helen did earlier. And, or you see cars and so on. In this manner of seeing, what we are seeing is separate from us. It's outside of us. And so there is always this division between the subject who is seeing and the object that is being seen. But in doing so, we only see with this one very, very narrow angle that comes from this self that I think is the subject of my seeing, looking at the world out there, and I see things from that very, very narrow single perspective of my little egoic self. But now in this mode of seeing that we arrive at after in the practice of shamatha and vipassana, that little egoic self dissolves and we are able to see, as the Buddhist scriptures say, yatha bhutam, just as they are. How do we see things just as they are? For example, if I look at a stick or this pen, for example, I'm seeing it from my angle here. And then I know that around it, there are also angles that I'm not able to see all at once. And so how can I see it in a way that I'm seeing it 360 degrees? That's impossible from our phenomenal world where we are just seeing based on the subject, seer, looking at the objective world as objects of the act of seeing. But in the place of contemplative silence through shamatha, our hearts are opened and to see things without obstruction, just as they are. In short, we leave our subject perspective behind and somehow see things just as they are. In short, there is a haiku that is quoted by a Japanese philosopher named Nishitani Keiji, who says that the way of seeing that this Buddhist stance of awakening invites us is like seeing a bamboo. To learn of the to see the bamboo. Now, let me see. I am trying to get the words correctly, approximately anyway. From the bamboo, learn of the bamboo. Or from the pine tree, learn of the pine tree. So rather than looking at the bamboo or the pine tree or whatever you may be seeing, from your egoic perspective, the invitation is to enter into that bamboo itself. In English, we have to say like that, we have to say something very impractical and awkward, like be the bamboo. How can you be the bamboo when you are a human being looking at the bamboo? But that's precisely what this way of seeing is inviting us to. Dissolve that egoic self that you think is the subject of seeing, and once it is dissolved, then bamboos stand out as bamboos, flowers stand out as flowers, pebbles stand out as just pebbles. The sky is the sky without the subject looking at it, but now somehow we have merged into the sky, we have merged into the bamboo, we have merged into the universe. That way of seeing. Now you see, I'm using words here that sound nonsensical because we know that words can never adequately depict what we're trying to convey. So it's only an invitation that we can offer for each and everyone to see for themselves. So be still, and in that stillness, open the eyes of your heart. And there may come a moment when, wow, now I see. I was blind and now I see. I was blind because I thought what I was seeing was a tree out there or a bamboo out there or a fence or a house outside of me. But now when that egoic self dissolves, we see without obstruction things just as they are. I'm trying my best to use words as an invitatory offering for each and every one to just experience that yourself when you're sitting there in silence. Or it may come to you not necessarily when you're sitting. Maybe you're walking slowly around your neighborhood or walking in a forest or sitting on a park bench somewhere, and your mind is quiet and just looking around. And if you are aware, then there may come a window of that realization. Aha, that's what it is. In that moment, the ego disappears, and what is seen is just what it is, just for what it is, just things just as they are. How can that be? That's the realization of Dharma. I will perhaps tomorrow mention how ultimately Buddha and Dharma merge. The awakened one and that which one is awakened to, the two jewels, the Buddha, the awakened one, and then the Dharma, which is that which is awakened to, somehow are no longer distinct. What is Buddha? What is Dharma? So I'm just trying to lay out that distinction, that the Buddha is the one who awakens, and the Dharma is what is awakened to, the truth that one realizes. And in realizing it, there is no more Buddha, there is no more Dharma. It's just that. Again, nonsensical words, but please take these as pointers to something that you might open up to in your own experience of stillness. So with that, then the first followers then said, yes, we will seek, we will follow your counsel, and we will sit and be still, and we will follow your guidelines in opening our heart to see things just as they are. And so it became a systematized way for people who were following him to a community life in a monastic setting and so on. And every day they would spend hours in that endeavor to sit in stillness, shamatha, and open their eyes and enable themselves to see things as they are. So that's at the heart of monastic discipline, contemplative practice or meditative practice. In Buddhism, these two words, meditation and contemplation, somehow are used interchangeably without too much difference. But in the Western traditions, there's a difference in the etymology and origin. I'll talk about that in another occasion, but it's an invitation to realize that Dharma, to see things just as they are. And so, but those who were following him said, please tell us more. We're doing what you're advising us to do, but please give us some more words and pointers to that. So this is how the Buddha came to speak different kinds of words to his followers, and they were heard by different people who memorized them, and then they put them down. They one of the most astute of his disciples was a person named Ananda, who had a very sharp memory, and he seems to have been able to recall so many of those sayings of the Buddha, so he could recite them whenever he was asked, what did the awakened one say on this occasion? And so he could repeat it. And so those words that Ananda then said were also taken and memorized by others, and it was handed down for some generations until the craft of writing came about. So that's when they began to write these words of the Buddha. But precisely, they are only handed down as words. We cannot take them in a very literal way, but we can only see them as pointers precisely for us to experience that reality that the Buddha himself experienced. But anyway, when he was asked, please tell us some more, give us some more pointers. So then the Buddha then noted what is known as the 3 marks of Dharma, the 3 seals, the 3 signs that you are grasping or understanding or realizing the liberating truth. The first one is the Dharma of impermanence, Anicha in the Pali. Anicca means there is nothing that persists and lasts forever. Everything passes by and goes and dissolves away. And that's a very understandable fact of life. There is nothing permanent in this life. Everything changes except change itself. I quipped. So now there's one way of looking at that as a lament, saying everything is impermanent, nothing can be held onto, and so therefore, woe is me. Let us grab everything and taste everything while they're still here, because they'll be gone tomorrow. So that's very similar to an attitude that comes from the Roman tradition that says, carpe diem, grab the day, because tomorrow we die. There is a song we learned when I was a Jesuit seminarian learning Latin about how let us rejoice today while we are young and we are still able to celebrate, because tomorrow the dust will take us. Gaudeamus igitur juvenes dum sumus. Let's rejoice while we're young. Gaudeamus igitur juvenes dum sumus. Nos habebit humus. Sooner or later, the dust will take over us, and that's it. So let's rejoice while we're still alive. But that's not what the Buddha was trying to convey in terms of this message of impermanence. He was pointing out the fact that everything goes and there is nothing that you can hold on to as permanent. But it was not a lament. It was simply a statement of fact and an invitation to take that with equanimity, so that as you experience each moment and you know that that moment will soon pass away, just let yourself be in that moment and be fully there, so that you're not clinging to something that will eventually pass away, and you are not looking back at something, but you are simply living there each moment, and there, in accepting that which is there right there at that moment, you're at peace. you are free. The way to take that truth, that Dharma seal of impermanence, is not as a lament, but as a matter of fact that invites us then to live in equanimity each moment and take it for what it is. If we are celebrating with friends, let's celebrate with friends without clinging to it so that, I wish this would last forever. And then when the party has finished and we're now left alone in our own little places, we take that and we simply live with that and do whatever we need to do at that place and so on until it moves on to the next phase. So with each phase, we simply ride with the flow of the ups and downs of life without being attached to one side or the other. And our Zen practice also gives us that guideline that whatever happens, we simply acknowledge it and we take it and we live through it in peace and equanimity, which leaves our heart free to open our hearts to others in compassion. Now, the second Dharma seal is a little more tricky to understand, but it is encapsulated in the Pali word anatta, which means not self. I'm trying to look into the implications of this at this point in the way that the scholars have presented it, but to make a long story short and not to burden you with all these scholarly commentaries, not self is simply inviting us to realize that this little egoic self that I think is myself is only a construct. And I get attached to this construct thinking that my life will depend on whether I get what I want or I find myself praised and so on, or whether I feel the satisfaction of the pleasure and the power and the possessions that I may acquire. And so it is something that propels our day-to-day activities. But that which propels our day-to-day activities is simply a construct. And ultimately, when you come down to it, it's a delusion. It's a delusive concept that we are moved by, and therefore, as we continue to be propelled by that, we keep running into that sense of dis-ease and dissatisfaction and thereby make a mess of our own lives. So in short, this Dharma seal of not self is a pointer to us not to get attached to this little I, me, mine that seems to be driving all my thoughts, words, and activities, and allow myself to simply take things as they are and let things be. And therefore, in realizing that I no longer need to pursue the whims of this little egoic self, I can truly relish each moment just as it is, in freedom and in a celebration of each thing as they are. Because there is no I that I would have to refer things to, whether it's good for me and whether it's pleasurable for me and so on. When that I has dissolved from my horizon and I am able to see things and celebrate them just as they are, then I'm able to dance with the dance of the universe and allow things to be as they are. And so I am what you could call a free agent that can enable each and everyone and each and everything to just be as they are. That Dharma seal of non-self. Now, let me give a hint for those of you who are practicing with the koan mu. This practice of mu is a way for us to allow this little egoic self to merge into something that we cannot conceptualize. See, it's mu, or Korean, it's bu, or in Chinese, it's wu. So as we breathe in with the fullness of what the breath can give us. And as we breathe out, we are invited to empty our whole being into this inconceivable, this impenetrable, this very obtuse sound called woo or moo. And as we continue doing that, as we arrive at a certain stage where the consciousness with which I bring in breathing out woo somehow dissipates and thins out and merges into just woo itself, that enables us to let go of this little controlling I, me, mind that runs our day-to-day life. And so there may come a moment when that little egoic self really merges into that impenetrable sound, and somehow in merging into it, your eyes are opened and you realize that fact of not self. What is not self? Look around and see that precisely as what the Buddha awakened to, and you will be free. Again, these words, clumsy or ununderstandable, but it's an invitation to continue our practice in this direction, knowing that so many people have gone through this passage and have precisely gone through that tunnel and have opened out to that pure light that this practice opens out to us, awaiting on the other end of the tunnel. Now, the third Dharma seal is Dukkha, or the fact of dissatisfactoriness of our day-to-day life. I've already mentioned this several times, alluding to it, namely, as long as we are relying on what we think can satisfy us in terms of pleasure or power or possessions, then we will always be betrayed by those things that we think can make us happy. Because, first of all, they're not lasting. Secondly, they're not truly ourselves, and they're not truly what can satisfy us. And thirdly, even if we did get them, our hearts then ask, is that all there is? So that situation of never being satisfied as long as our intent is to obtain pleasure, power, possessions, material, or finite objects that we think we can get hold on, that we can hold on to, then we are always left in that sense of unease. But when we realize precisely the impermanence of things and see that with equanimity, and when we realize the true import of not self, then we arrive at that place of peace, and our longing for things that are impermanent or things that are not self ceases, and so we are at peace, and we arrive at that so-called place of peace, that place that is also called the place where your greed, ill will, and ignorance has now been extinguished, and you are now at a place of equanimity where you can see things as they are. And that place of equanimity gives forth a sense of loving kindness for everyone, and a sense of compassion, karuna, for everyone and for the entire universe, because there is no longer any opposition between the I, egoic self that's here, and the world out there. But since that little I has merged into whatever there is, comes forth what is called the four divine abodes, the four divine abidings. These are loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. That is the heart of someone who has arrived at the Dharma, who has awakened to the Dharma. These are taken from the vocabulary of early Buddhism. So I'd like to invite you then to simply take on the invitation of the Buddha to sit still, be still, let your mind be still and not move about seeking this or that. Even those who are practicing with a koan mu, do not engage in your practice as if to seek mu. There is nothing to find out there's nothing to find in seeking mu. Mu is simply a vehicle for you to put yourself into, to ride into, so to speak, or to allow you that passage from your egoic self to that which is not self, to that which is beyond words, but yet that which can fill your heart with joy and peace and gratitude. So with that then, the Dharma is a pointer for us to then awaken that spark and to kindle that spark of the Buddha that is in us. So let us take the guidelines that the Buddha offered with our Zen practice and allow the Dharma to emerge in our day-to-day life. We will continue with further elaborations in the next few days.
Let us now recite the Boundless Compassion 3 times. Boundless compassion. Absorbing world sounds awakens the Buddha. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Bless the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recalls it, in the dark recalls it. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this. Absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this. Moment after moment, the true heart arises. Time after time, there is nothing but this.